Morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. This morning, the United States and China appear to be inching closer to a trade war after Beijing revealed it would be retaliating against Washington tariffs with their own on U.S. goods. This was within minutes of the U.S.'s 10% tariff on Chinese imports coming into effect at midnight.
Beijing announced that it would impose tariffs of 15% on U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas, also 10% on other U.S. imports like crude oil and agricultural machinery. Beijing says those tariffs would go into effect on February 10th. That's next Monday. Despite this looming trade war with China, America's tariffs on Canada and Mexico appear to be on hold for now. Following a phone call with Canada's Prime Minister, Mr. Trump said he would pause tariffs for 30 days, citing Canada's plans to ramp up border security. It's important to note those border plans by Canada had actually been announced back in December. Yesterday morning, the president put a similar tariff delay on Mexico after speaking with his Mexican counterpart. She also told him that her country would be beefing up security at the southern border.
They've agreed to put in 10,000 soldiers permanently, like forever, 10,000 soldiers at their side of the border and stop fentanyl and illegal aliens from coming into our country. And we're going to have a big negotiation with Mexico. I'll be involved too, and President Sheinbaum will be involved to see whether or not we can work something out on the tariffs.
A lot to cover. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and NBC News International correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer, who is in Beijing. Good morning to both of you. So, Janice, let's start with you. Walk us through these retaliatory tariffs China has announced. Which U.S. industries is China targeting?
Well, as President Trump stands down on Canada and Mexico, it seems to be heating up with China. Rapid-fire retaliation today from Beijing on multiple fronts. First, China is imposing additional tariffs of 10 to 15% on a range of U.S. imports, including coal, liquefied natural gas, crude oil, and farm machinery. It's also targeting some car imports, namely pickup trucks, and announced additional export controls on more than 24 critical metals. This is effective immediately. The tariffs, though, take effect on February 10th. The measures aren't seen as making a huge dent in the U.S. economy. Economists say it's more symbolic. The measures affect roughly 30% of U.S. exports to China. But they do seem designed to send a message from China that it could get a lot worse, in particular for red states. It's thought that China's leader, Xi Jinping, and President Trump were looking for a reset in relations. Xi sent his vice president to attend the inauguration. And that potential is still seen as being there. But on tariffs, Xi and the officials around him would not want to be seen as caving to President Trump, the U.S., or the West. So China was expected to hit back. Joe and Savannah.
Yeah, so Aaron, let's bring you in here and pick up right there. We understand President Trump is expected to speak with China's President Xi over the next few days. Were these retaliatory measures expected by the White House? And does it mean that we then see the Trump administration hit back again?
I think yes and yes. We knew over the weekend that the Chinese indicated that they would take steps to push back when these, if and when these tariffs from the U.S. went into effect, that they would challenge the tariffs in the World Trade Organization in sort of a court setting, and that they would take these steps that we now know they have taken. At the same time, we heard from President Trump yesterday that he intends to talk to the Chinese president, and so that could be a sign that there might be a deal to be made here, as we saw with Mexico and with Canada. At the same time, we know that the original executive order that was signed that put these tariffs on China did include a retaliation clause. And so it's effectively it said that if China took action, then the U.S. could take additional actions. The sound you played from President Trump indicated as much as well. And we also heard Secretary of State Marco Rubio say on television last night that he felt like if China continued to cheat and steal, the words he used, then that there would be additional actions taken by the U.S. I think it's worth pointing out that that sort of murkies the water here, because that seems to indicate something economic. At the same time, we know that these tariffs from the U.S. were originally put in place, at least according to the executive order, because the U.S. administration wanted to stop the flow of fentanyl and precursor drugs that come from China.
So, Janice, you've got the tariffs, but on top of that, China also announced it's going to open an investigation into Google, while adding certain U.S. companies to what it calls its unreliable entity list. So what is that? What does this all mean?
Well, it's an antitrust probe into Google, which is not the first. for the company. It doesn't do a lot of business here because the search engine is obviously blocked, but it is disruptive for Chinese companies, and the government appears to be wanting to make a point. As well, two companies, PVH Group, which owns clothing brands like Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, and Illumina, it's a gene sequencing startup. They're both being added to China's unreliable entity list here, meaning they're effectively blacklisted from doing business. So this reaction, again, coming from China on multiple fronts. The uncertainty now is whether this is all the preamble for negotiating tactics between these two huge economies, or whether it's the beginning of a deeper trade confrontation. President Trump has said that he plans to speak with President Xi. It isn't clear when or if that call is happening. But with both sides now looking for leverage in this, the signs seem to point to a bumpy road ahead. Joe and Savannah.
Aaron, we mentioned tariffs are on hold for Canada and Mexico. What happens next there?
Yeah, 1 month delay on the tariffs for Canada and Mexico after each of those countries indicated they would push back if the tariffs were applied to them. At the same time, these leader phone calls happened just yesterday where President Trump spoke with the Mexican president and the Canadian prime minister and decided that some concessions would be made, that the Mexicans would send 10,000 troops to their northern border to deal with the flow of undocumented migrants and the flow of drugs as well. The Mexicans said the U.S. Had agreed to start working on trying to prevent high-powered weapons from crossing into Mexico. The Canadians, for their part, saying that they would spend upwards of $1 billion on border security via additional helicopters and personnel, as well as some technology being used there. They would create a position of a fentanyl czar in the Canadian government. Those are all things that seem to be enough to create this pause. Although the White House is saying that they'll be evaluating this along the way. They'll have Secretary of State Rubio, as well as several other secretaries, continuing negotiations with both Canada and Mexico. Savannah, Joe?
We'll see if we're right back here a month from now. Aaron, Janice, thank you both.
Well, some federal government workers are on edge this morning as President Trump and his billionaire right hand, Elon Musk, attempt to dismantle multiple federal agencies with lightning speed. Both men vowed to shut down USAID that provides crucial humanitarian assistance around the world.
It comes after nearly a dozen FBI officials were fired last week, with the possibility of more to come. Our senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has more.
This partnership of power under intense new scrutiny. President Trump and the world's richest man, Elon Musk, upending federal agencies to overhaul government and slash spending. The president acknowledged that Musk can get inside sensitive government computers like the Treasury Department payment system.
Well, he's got access only to letting people go that he thinks are no good if we agree with him, and it's only if we agree with him.
The White House says in his role running the Department of Government Efficiency, Musk is designated as a special government employee with top secret security clearance.
Elon can't do and won't do anything without our approval, and we'll give him the approval where appropriate. Where not appropriate, we won't.
A top Musk target, the U.S. Agency for International Development. He argues there is too much waste in its $42 billion budget. USAID delivers food, medicine, vaccinations, and humanitarian support to 60 countries, help that is considered vital to U.S. national security. Musk spoke on his X platform, declaring the agency must be shut down.
What we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says core life-saving programs will not be frozen during a 90-day review.
These are not donor dollars, these are taxpayer dollars. So far, a lot of the people that work at USAID have just simply refused to cooperate.
USAID is authorized and funded by Congress. Democratic lawmakers blasted the shutdown as illegal and dangerous.
Elon Musk did not create USAID. He doesn't have the power to destroy it. We're going to stop him.
USAID workers told to stay home as many relief programs are halted. Fear is also rattling the FBI. 8 top career officials fired Friday and a top official seeking names of agents who worked on January 6th cases. The FBI Agents Association in a statement described agents as extremely fearful of being removed, and some started to pack up their desks. This tension at the Bureau comes as the Senate is still working through the confirmation process for Kash Patel to be the next FBI director. He said under oath at his hearing that all FBI employees would be protected from political retribution. And Senate Democrats on that key committee are saying they want more answers about what's happening inside the FBI.
All right, Kelly, thank you.
We're joined now by Dr. Atul Gawande. He's the former assistant administrator for global health at USAID. Dr. Gawande, good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. Yesterday on X, you called the potential USAID shutdown unconstitutional. I know you've also spoken with workers who are still currently at the agency. What have they told you about what's happening there?
It's now been several days, almost a week of total freezing of all activities. And what they're decrying, what Musk has called worms, has said that is a criminal enterprise, are programs that work through, nasty organizations like Catholic Relief Services, Save the Children, the World Food Program. These programs were reaching, just a week ago, hundreds of millions of people around the world. And now there are 20 million people who are able to get HIV medicines who can't. These are medicines keeping them alive, and they are not getting them. They are people who've been terminated. It's a purging of the organization, including top experts in malaria, childhood immunization, and so on. There are thousands of people who are being laid off, even in the United States, in the last few days and going into the coming week.
Shutting down the organization, you mentioned some of the global impacts. Do you worry it could have an impact here at home as well?
100%. These are, they're on several levels. Number one, just 2 weeks ago, until I transitioned out of the Biden administration, we were leading work addressing disease outbreaks all over the world. This includes bird flu, which has already killed an American on home soil. The program monitoring in 49 countries where bird flu is coming in and what's happening has been shut down. Those folks are not working. And there are 3 serious other outbreaks happening. That's just one example. Eradication of polio, ending HIV, ending TB. These benefit Americans and humanity.
USAID spends money, as you just mentioned, in foreign countries on things like critical medical supplies and treatment. But there's also been a lot of talk about other things that money is spent on. For example, one thing that NBC News pulled out was media platforms in countries like Moldova to counter Russian disinformation. Can you understand why some taxpayers might be confused by that use of money or not think it's a good use of money? How do you explain some of these things and why it's necessary?
USAID is the cornerstone of our national security, and it works through civilian relationships that advance not only what I've described, disaster relief and health, but also bring us influence in places where we otherwise don't have it to counter Russian and Chinese propaganda and efforts. That includes addressing misinformation, bolstering civil society organizations in Africa, Asia, and in Eastern Europe. This is a vital part of our national security, all shut down. It's like taking the Department of Defense and saying, I'm going to put it on pause. I'm a surgeon. You can't put an operation on pause halfway through and say, I'll be back in 90 days. People are already being harmed. People are already dying as a consequence.
All right, Dr. Atul Gawande, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, at the heart of the tariff drama we've been discussing all morning is the southern U.S. border. And that is where Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just met with U.S. troops who were recently sent to New Mexico. The visit comes as we learn some undocumented migrants arrested by the Trump administration are already being released back into the U.S. to the apparent surprise of the border czar. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson is there.
Leaving Washington for the first time since his confirmation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth headed to the U.S. southern border in New Mexico to shake hands with some of the 1,500 troops deployed by President Trump, who joined the 2,500 already in place under former President Biden.
These troops aren't able to do enforcement, so what exactly are their day-to-day tasks?
What they do is relieve Border Patrol and to have the opportunity to actually do the interdictions. They're calling in observation to Border Patrol, who then interdict. It's a process that in the past, Tom was telling me, might take 30 minutes.
The show of force, part of a larger immigration crackdown, including military mass deportation flights and ICE raids. Yet exclusive NBC News reporting shows that ICE has already released some migrants back into the United States, opting to use ankle monitors due to full beds and federal court orders that prohibit indefinite detention. We asked Border Czar Tom Homan about the releases.
I'm not aware of that, but now you said that, I'll find out what happened.
Over the weekend, the Department of Defense released this video they say shows Marines taking off for Guantanamo Bay, preparing to house migrants at a military site there.
We are building out our capacity at Guantanamo Bay. Right now, that is where the worst are going.
And across the country, from Chicago to Los Angeles, hundreds took to the streets to protest escalating immigration enforcement. As some businesses closed their doors, hoping to show what a country without immigrant labor might look like.
Without immigrants, we wouldn't have food to serve. So I think that's mainly like our point in doing that and showing people that like this is what how it would affect you and how it really does affect us all.
Our thanks to Priscilla Thompson for that report. In another development, the state of Texas has granted its National Guard soldiers the power to make immigration arrests, a power not granted to troops sent to the border by the federal government.
Well, as President Trump's second term gets up to full speed, every day seems to bring a new flood of executive action as the administration tries to quickly remake the federal government. At the center of it all is the president's chief of staff, a guiding force who has largely avoided the spotlight while making history. Susie Wiles, the Trump campaign co-chair and veteran of Florida politics, is the first woman to hold the position of White House chief of staff. NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard has her story.
The Ice Baby. We call her the Ice Baby.
That's President Trump's nickname of choice for his incoming chief of staff, Susie Wiles, whose successful captaining of his 2024 campaign earned her a reputation of leading with a calm demeanor, but also a resolute poise, respected among Trump's closest allies. Wiles set to become the first woman ever to hold the powerful post. But under this president, she'll face another challenge, keeping her job for a full term, something her predecessors from Trump admin 1.0 failed to do. Wiles' ascension comes after a long career steering powerful men to elected office, at the sides of mayors in Jacksonville, Florida, and running the gubernatorial campaigns for Rick Scott and later Ron DeSantis. Back in 2015, Donald Trump was still just a long-shot candidate for president, so he turned to Wiles for help in winning Florida, which he did. Once Trump was in the White House, a revolving door of chiefs of staff. The first, Reince Priebus, holding the role for one of the shortest stints in American history. The second, John Kelly, a former Marine Corps general. Kelly clashing behind closed doors with the president, resigning after just over a year in the role, later lashing out at his former boss, comparing him to a dictator. OMB Director Mick Mulvaney was next, but just in an acting capacity, until Mr. Trump settled on Congressman Mark Meadows to close out his first term. Meadows would go on to be indicted along with Mr. Trump down in Fulton County, Georgia, as part of alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Meadows pled not guilty while the prosecution remains in limbo. In November 2022, Trump turned to his fellow Floridian to take the helm of his comeback campaign, leading the latest White House bid as a co-campaign manager. Wiles navigated the Trump team through assassination attempts, a change at the top of the Democratic ticket, in multiple criminal cases, also avoiding the kind of staff turnover that plagued not just the first administration, but the first two campaigns. Trump trying to give her the undesired spotlight on election night.
Susie, come. Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you.
And just days later, announcing she had the job, crediting her with helping achieve one of the greatest political victories in American history. But the question remains, can the woman nicknamed the Ice Maiden keep 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue operating smoothly? Or will her chief of staff tenure face similar fates as the men before her? Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News, Washington.
Staying in Washington, today's salvage crews plan to lift more of that American Airlines jet out of the Potomac River. It is a meticulous, piece-by-piece process following last week's deadly midair crash. Investigators are also starting to get a clearer picture of what happened in the moments before impact. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has more.
Just be advised, conducting first lift.
It was just before 10 a.m. when recovery teams managed to lift one of the American Eagle's engines out of the Potomac River.
We transferred debris from the water to FBI here on the eastern shore.
A flotilla of boats, cranes, and divers working to raise pieces of the fuselage, the windows still visible, and recover the remains of the last 12 of the 67 people who died in that midair crash with an Army helicopter. New NTSB drone video shows the wreckage of both the plane and the Black Hawk resting in the Potomac. NTSB investigators are hoping the helicopter's black box will reveal its altitude before the crash. Air traffic control radar indicated it was at 200 feet, the maximum allowed for choppers. But the plane's black box shows the crash happened at roughly 325 feet.
There are all kinds of reasons that you could deviate from an altitude. You know, something as simple as a flock of birds is in front of you, or you may deviate if you see something that's an obstacle or other threat to your flight.
Like many control towers, Reagan National has struggled with understaffing and overtime. On Wednesday night, 5 controllers were on duty, just one handling both plane and helicopter traffic.
They are stressed out, they're tapped out, they're overworked. That's no excuse.
For years, Reagan's congested airspace has been a top safety concern, with planes and choppers flying just a few hundred feet apart. For now, the airspace is closed to all but police and medevac helicopters. Captain Jason Ambrosi is the president of the Airline Pilots Union.
Is it time to separate out helicopter traffic from regular passenger traffic here at Reagan Airport? Yeah, look, it's an ongoing investigation, but clearly we can see that helicopter traffic and airline traffic doesn't mix.
On board the regional jet, 28 members of the U.S. figure skating community, most of them teenagers, parents, and coaches.
Our thanks to Tom Costello for that report. Investigators are working to synchronize flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder data from both of the aircraft, as well as air traffic control communications, to build a detailed timeline of the crash.
Let's turn now to weather. Around 13 million people in Central California find themselves under flood watches this morning.
Meteorologist Angie Lassman has more on the dangerous conditions coming to the West Coast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. We've had a kind of busy weekend for folks across the West Coast, specifically California, with multiple kind of rainy days for them. And so no surprise, with more rain on the way, we've got these flood alerts up. Today, they are centered mainly across Central California. So we've got San Francisco and Sacramento included in that. 13 million people across this region are going to keep those in effect through the day today. And you can see why. More of that moisture kind of making a beeline for the coast as the day goes on. It does fall in the form of snow for some folks and, of course, heavy rain for others. So the flood risk will remain with us through the day today. Notice, though, by tomorrow, that shifts off towards parts of the Rockies and we get a bit of a break for California. That doesn't last, though, because, of course, we've got this atmospheric river set up. And basically, that's a highway for these storms to kind of make a beeline into the coast. And that's exactly what we see happen once again by the time we get into Thursday. So, again, a renewed flood threat as we round out our next couple of days and this work week. As we get close to the end of it, at least, we'll see multiple kind of days where we deal with flooding across this region. One thing to note for today, the flash flooding is focused from Fort Bragg out towards Sacramento, including San Francisco, and down just north of San Luis Obispo. So this is going to be something that we likely will see develop through the day today. In some spots, we could see upwards of 5 to even 10 inches of rain, especially for those coastal ranges. We'll also see some really much needed rainfall across parts of Southern California. That does include Los Angeles, Santa Barbara area, with about 1 to 3 inches for folks there. Snowfall totals will be upwards of a foot to 2 feet in some of these locations, specifically the Sierra range. We'll pick up some additional snow. Now, meanwhile, we've got really chilly air kind of settling into parts of the northern plains. So we've got some of these cold weather alerts up, and for good reason. These temperatures, at least it feels like, are well below zero right now. Notice Minneapolis, 17 degrees below zero is what it feels like, with an actual temperature sitting at just zero. Big difference for what they're dealing with for the southern half of the country, though. Notice these temperatures today. We'll see some potential records across basically places like Houston. We'll head to 80 degrees. The record for this date, 81. We'll be into the upper 70s across the southeast. Phoenix heads to 85 degrees, guys. We'll keep that cooler kind of trend going for our friends in the northern part of the country. But the southern half, I mean, boy, feels like spring and then some.
This is when the Minnesotans are glad they planned their Florida vacation for this week now.
Correct.
At this moment.
They have a lot of practice.
The stars align. Thanks,
Angie. You got it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.